It's a nation in isolation. It's a nation in isolation. It's a difficult situation. It's a nation in isolation. Not time to have a libation. I used to drink way too much. Then I realized it was a crutch. Day to day, year to year, it's a struggle, but have no fear, yeah. It's a nation in isolation. It's a difficult situation. It's a nation in isolation. You don't need that social lubrication.
I'm coming up on 5 years clean in September.
I have 12 years sober.
9 years into sobriety.
I've been sober for a little over 32 years now.
In the 6 years of my recovery.
It's a nation in isolation. It's a difficult situation. It's a nation in isolation. It just takes a little preparation, yeah.
Yeah, we're so pumped for this. You know, the whole thing about Isolation Nation has kind of evolved, and we've learned so much, and we've learned in a lot of ways just how widespread addiction is, and just how many people there are who have profile, who are willing to share that for the benefit of others, and that is an amazing experience. And if you are worried about being triggered, and if hearing other people tell their story triggers you, then you should probably look elsewhere right now. But if you feel like hearing stories that will inspire you, hearing how people have done it, hearing how people have struggled with it, if you feel like that can make a difference in your life, then you have come to the right place. Sean Cullen, you would be guest number one today. How are you, Sean?
Hi, how are you? It's great to be alive.
You know, it is great to be alive. And you, I mean, you sang the song, you sing a song for us every day. You know, I could tell you how much I appreciate that, but the fact is we're here more to talk about you. You mentioned that you had, you were telling me that you have experienced issues with alcohol, and you've seen issues with alcohol since you were very young, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my father was an alcoholic, and it kind of brought a lot of tension into the house and a lot of worry, and it really affects your behavior, and it isolates you, I think, in a lot of ways. Like, you become distrustful of people and distrustful of relationships. And later on in your life, I found that I just didn't have close friends because I'd always kept people at arm's length because alcohol in my house, we could never have people come home to visit, or I never brought friends to my house because I didn't know what would happen. And it kept all these people at arm's length from me. And then as I got older, I started drinking myself, and I never really realized how much I drank. And it was always something that I could drink an awful lot and not be affected, or at least believe that I'd be affected by it. And I used to find it, there was a point in my early career where the only way I could get on stage was if I had a few beers to get there, because I was so unhappy at the time. And later on, to deal with my divorce, I'd started to drink a lot. And I'd drink, I would sit down and go, I'd buy a bottle of vodka today, and tomorrow it would be gone. And I'd be like, I drank all of that, and that doesn't seem to be normal. What is normal? I didn't even understand it. I would drink every day, and a certain amount. And the other thing is, if there was alcohol in the house, I would drink it. It would be gone. I could never have like a drinks cabinet. I would drink everything, so it never was a good situation. And I tried to quit last year, and I did for about 3 months. And then it was my birthday, and I thought, I'd always in my mind gone, I can have a drink on my birthday. That's okay. And then I just started drinking again. And so I realized that there has to be no gift myself or like, compromise. I'm just not meant to drink. I'm not meant to do it. It doesn't work for me. And I can't just have a couple or one. It has to be lots. So this year on January 1st, I said, no end point. It's just starting from now. I'm just going to be a person who doesn't drink anymore. So it's been only 165 days. I look at other people's stories and I go, well, that's not, tremendous, but at least it's a start. I guess you have to start somewhere.
Well, from January 1st, you couldn't be doing better than 165 days. I mean, I wouldn't look at that when you look at Alonzo Bodden and you figure, he's been sober for 32 years. That's not relevant to you, except I would think to show you that, it can be done for a long period of time. For you, what was the last thing that you thought or experienced that got you to decide, I'm done with this? And how much of your drinking was to manage mental health issues?
Well, I think, I didn't realize I had depression until about 16 years ago. And I had always drunk to improve my mood, remove my inhibitions, make it easier to talk to people, to be part of a group. And I think, I'm very self-contained. I don't, a lot of people don't know me very well, and I have very few close friends. And that's I think, part of my upbringing. But the alcohol, certainly, you think it's making you a happier person and more fun and more easygoing and all of that. And it's really not. It's exacerbating your depression. Like I would do it to make myself more happy, more fun. But at the end of it all, I would always be like, I hate myself. I loathe this feeling. I'm in a place where I'm not in control anymore and I'm not happy. And you wake up the next day and your day is lost, and, you create nothing the next day. And I'm a big person for creation. I like to make things, and I like to fill the space around me with things, with creations, with comedy, with writing, with all of these things. And it just took away all my ambition to do these things. And now I've just been, it's funny, this isolation, I've been more productive in the last, 3 months, making things, doing things every day than I have been in a long time. And it's kind of, I'm just glad I'm not drinking at this time, because I'd just be sitting drinking. And the other thing about it was I drank alone a lot. I just would it got to the point where I would just come home and drink by myself. And who am I trying to entertain or be fun with at that point? At that point, it's just an addiction to this feeling. It's funny, like I'd watch Mad Men and I'd say, oh, look at that giant glass of whiskey. That makes me want to drink whiskey right now. And I would. And, that's the hardest thing, watching other people enjoy. But I think it's been good to be isolated and away from all of that while I'm trying to get on track with it. Anyway, I hope I'm not rambling.
You're not rambling, and I know that there's 5 others in this conversation who would agree with me on that, and everybody's going to take something away from this that may benefit them in the end. And 165 days or 32 years, there's a wisdom that each one of you have that I think the others need. Say hi to Jordin Tootoo. Let's bring Jordin into this. I know you're a hockey fan, and Jordin Tootoo is a hockey player. So, hey, Jordin, how are you?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me today.
Thanks
Jordin
for
Tootoo, the Tootoo train. Is that what they call it? The Tootoo train.
The Tootoo train when I drank.
Yeah. Now you're not a train anymore. You're a human being.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Hey, Sean, hang around if you can. We'll have I have my fridge is stocked with non-alcoholic beer. So I think we can all enjoy that later on, because I don't drink either, but not for the same reasons. Thanks, man. Jordin. What'd you think of Sean's story?
I mean, I could resonate with a lot. I grew up in a household where basically I couldn't be a kid. I was terrified, right? Because my parents, were alcoholics, and the uncertainty of what was to come next, right? When they started drinking. And so, I grew up with fear, being in fear as a young kid, and all the way up until I basically left home at 14 years old. I was fortunate enough to have the game of hockey as my outlet. And when an opportunity came up, there was nothing stopping me from leaving home, because I thought life was better elsewhere. And but it wasn't the case. Having to deal with a lot of different aspects of life. I grew up in a very isolated community in the far north of Nunavut, Rankin Inlet, which is located right along the Hudson Bay. Grew up knowing everybody. Then I moved south, and it was a culture shock. I then was faced with a lot of racism and so on. And for me, I was fortunate enough to have an older brother who guided me. He was 3 years older than me, and so I was I was pretty catered by him as far as being mentally strong and being able to put one foot forward in front of the other, no matter the situation. My brother was, he was my best friend. He was my mentor. He was my father figure. And still to this day, I am forever grateful that I spent 19 years of my life with him. He took his own life in 2002. And that's when my alcoholism really started to escalate into my professional career. I was, a pretty functional drunk, so I thought. I was a binge drinker. Like Sean said, if it was in front of me and I had a day off the next day, once the cap was off, it wasn't going back on until it was done. So, and then, throughout my professional career, things started escalating, and I knew that, I was going to be the next victim if I didn't accept help.
Jordin, I mean, your story is really has a lot of dimensions to it, right? Given how you were brought up, the level of addiction that exists in your community, the level of mental illness, the racism that you faced. I'm wondering if you feel like, and I know the answer is yes, but if you felt like you were self-medicating, what did you replace the self-medication with when you decided 10 years ago, I'm done with this?
Well, honoring my brother's legacy, right? Because my brother Terrence was a true leader. He led by example. And, when I decided that it was time for me to accept help, I lived by three sentences my brother left me. He left me a note and said, "Jor, go all the way," which meant, make it to the NHL, take care of the family. My brother was a family man. He made sure he was kind of the mediator of our family. And then, he, as a young kid, he would always tell me, "You are the man." And I believe in yourself, be comfortable and content in your own skin. So, those 3 lines that he left me: go all the way, take care of the family, you are the man. When I entered rehab, I made sure that those 3 lines were beside my nightstand every morning I woke up. And the teachings that he taught me, and really believe and to accept who you are and where you come from, definitely has helped me in sobriety. I was a man of few words. I didn't talk a lot. I didn't know how to articulate my thought process and put it to words, because I grew up in a house where nothing was ever talked about. You shut up and you put up with it. I didn't know how to express my feelings. I would just rage, and hockey was my out to rage. That's why I was in, the first 8 years of my professional career, I was an angry person inside. And thank God that I was able to fight and release those endorphins.
Just as we move on to Alonzo, Terrence said 3 things to you: be the man, go all the way, and what was the third one?
You are it said, Jor, go all the way, take care of the family, you are the man, Terrence. And when I found that note, Michael, I grabbed that note and I crunched it up and I threw it in the garbage, because I was like, wow, my brother's never ever said anything like that to me. That was very nice of him. Well, a day later, I went back to that trash can and I grabbed that note, and that same day I found out that my brother took his own life, and those were his last words that he left anybody. My brother and I were like this. We spent every day together in the off season, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate. When you lose a family member, you look to blame somebody else, right? And for me, when I accepted the fact that he took his own life, not that I turned the page to forget about it, but in order for me to live my life and to move forward, I was able to accept that it happened, and now, like I said before, I want to stop one cycle and start a new cycle for my family.
Thank you so much for sharing this. I've spoken to you a number of times on this show, and each time it's, I learned something, right? I learned something about you, and each time I'm mystified by the idea that, as you said, you didn't talk, you were the silent one. And I listened to your eloquence and your ability to say thoughts that come from the deepest part of you and also make a difference to others. I think that's incredible. Thanks, man.
Thank you for having me, Mike. Appreciate it.
Alonzo Bodden.
Hello, sir.
Jordin Tootoo, he talked about how facing racism affected him. You have been sober for 32 years, or you have been clean and sober for 32 years. What effect did racism have on your original addiction?
Well, and I appreciate what Sean and what Jordin had to say. And I want to talk about this really quick, about the things that we have in common, the commonalities of addicts and alcoholics. I love what Sean was saying about seeing the whiskey and wanting to drink the whiskey. And we notice that when others don't. And what Jordin, I'm sorry about the loss of your brother, but this relates to the race thing you asked about, Mike, that feeling of being different. Okay. And not only that, also being an overachiever. I mean, obviously Jordin made it to the NHL. So he was an overachiever in hockey. He had to be the best player at each level until he made it to the top, and you find out in recovery that a lot of us have that, but that didn't make a difference. That didn't make it okay. And they talked about the self-loathing and the self-hate, and that's part of it. Where the race comes in is feeling different, is being made to feel different in a group. With me, it was more the intimidation, right? People being intimidated by me. And it's frustrating because as you know, Mike, I'm not a violent guy. I don't look for trouble or anything like that, but it's very hard to put people at ease. And it's very tiring to attempt to put people at ease. So I would say that's where it came in. And what happens in recovery that blankets all of this is finding out you're not the only one. See, recovery is a community. Very rarely have I seen anything racial come up.
So let's fast forward 32 years. You know, I want you to share something now with our next guest. We're not going to her yet, but she's been in recovery for 5 years, but relapsed a couple of times, including 2 months ago. Natalie, you're kind of like the legend. You're Tom Brady, and you're talking to a young quarterback.
Well, let me tell you about that. No, I'm not. Listen, it is a day at a time. Every day that, like, if you're sober one day, if you're sober today, you're tied for first place. You know, I looked on this app because Sean was talking about having 165 days. So I have 11,778 days, but it's still one day at a time. And what happened with me, and they taught me this, and I heard this, right? Like, you talked about non-alcoholic beer, okay? I never drank for the taste. Like, there's a level of honesty, right? So like Sean was saying, I did it for the effect. I never was like at a social crack use party. You know what I mean? Like it was about the effect. So I don't drink with non-alcoholic beer because they told me, they're like, what are you kidding? I never drank beer because it was hot outside. I drank beer for the effect. I never went to a party and said, oh, you don't have Absolute vodka? Well, I won't drink tonight. You know, I'm an alcoholic. I'm an addict. I do it for the effect. I do it to escape my thoughts and feelings. So to the person who relapses, I would say, and this is what helped me, because I relapsed once early. It was about being honest, and what they did, and what I'll be eternally grateful for to the guys who taught me about sobriety. They took away all the back doors. They took away every excuse. When Sean said the thing about waiting for his birthday, right? I didn't drink because it was my birthday. I didn't drink because it was Christmas. You know, St. Patrick's Day didn't matter to me. We in AA, in recovery, we call New Year's Eve amateur night. It's amateur night.
Yeah. It's wow. So here you are, like I said, 32 years later. I know you're a gentle soul, right? I mean, you know, I'm learning something, as I said, from everyone, and I just learned from you, and I never thought of it. How big are you? How tall are you?
6'3". So
you're a 6'3", large boned black man. And right. I've never thought to myself, what's that like to be you in a room of other people where they're looking at you, you know, like, oh my gosh, like this guy is intimidating, or, you know, all of the things that you would feel. And I never thought about that. But now I think about it and I think, hey, that would be really hard.
You know, it's funny because I didn't think about it until I moved out of my neighborhood. Because where I grew up in a black neighborhood. Everybody was big. Like, all the guys were over 6 feet tall. That was normal. But then when I moved away, and sometimes I'll be standing face to face with somebody, and I'm like, wow, I must look huge. Like, they're at my chest level or shoulder. I'm like, I must look like a giant to this person. But I'm not, you know, I'm normally not conscious of it. But that's the frustrating part. And then the other thing is, when I do get angry, or when I did get angry, and this is like Jordan was talking about, trying to let that out. You know what I mean? Like we're dealing with all this here in the States with the police, you know. I've had those encounters with the police, and I'll tell you what's really scary. And I've had this encounter when you're dealing with the police and they're scared of you. That is
wow.
And I've been in that situation, and, you know, thank God I have humor, a natural sense of humor, which can often diffuse that. But I have been in that situation, and it's insane. It's insane.
I met you probably 20 years ago on Off the Record when you were a guest, and yeah, I mean, there was something gentle that attracted me to you, right? Or attracted you to me. And, I thought, wow, this is a gentle soul of a man who's kind and gracious and giving. And I could see how the juxtaposition with what people would think of you as would be incredibly difficult to manage. Thank you for joining us today. I want you to say hi to Natalie Harris, and why don't you jump in with some words of wisdom for her? Although you have maybe run out of words of wisdom because you just gave us a whole lot.
Well, hello, Natalie. And what I would say,
Hi.
and this is what they told me: whatever I do to stay sober today, do it again tomorrow. That's all. It's very simple. And one day at a time is a powerful, powerful principle.
Thanks,
you.
Man.
That's Alonzo Bodden. Everybody, that's what, 3 guests now, you're number 4, and everybody has had a story which ended up in the same place with addiction, but everybody took vastly different routes to get there. What was your route to addiction?
So yeah, I'm a retired paramedic, and excuse me, I loved my job. It still is the best job in the world. And in 2012, I was one of the main paramedics at a double murder call here in Barrie, and it was part of a satanic cult. It was very, very traumatizing, obviously. And when I was taking care of my patient, he started talking, and we thought, okay, this patient maybe he was part of an attack. We didn't really know what the call was, but shortly into the call, we realized he was probably the murderer. So I was starting an IV on him while he was charged with 2 counts of homicide. And, we're trained to do what we do, and took care of him. And then back in 2012, there was barely any peer support or anything like that. It was just kind of pull up your socks and go to the next call. And I did that for 2 years as best as I could, but PTSD really started to rear its ugly head, and my nightmares, night terrors, and my drinking. I was already drinking pretty heavily before that. It unfortunately is a big part of the culture of the first responder world. But then I, was having trouble sleeping. So I was prescribed benzos, and I was taking other sleeping pills, and those didn't work anymore. And I was waking up in night terrors. So the PTSD was affecting my day life, and then it started affecting my nights. And then I just needed to somehow pass out. So there was no escaping what was in my mind. And I had something called a moral injury, and I never heard of that before. So it had turned the world really black for me. And it led me down a road of overdoses, and fortunately for me, a beautiful world of recovery. I'm going to treatment and a couple times now, but I'm just so grateful. It's funny when you reached out to me today to say, can I be on the show? And I'm looking at the list of people that are on the show, and I'm like, oh my goodness, how do I even fit in here? And that I'd had a relapse 2 months ago, because I'm very honest about that. But hearing Alonzo and everyone else speak reminds me so much of the message to carry to other people who are battling addiction, that it is one day at a time, that it literally is, if I stop doing the work, if I stop going to meetings and stop talking to my sponsor and stop taking care of myself, because that's where my relapse was from, then I spiral and my depression kicks in, and it's 1 hour at a time sometimes. And I'm just really grateful to be here.
And when you say be here, you mean on this planet, right? To experience having a grandchild, which I kidded around before, but I mean, you look absurdly young to have a grandchild, and you are very young to have a grandchild. But like you would have missed that.
Absolutely, yeah. I have 2 kids. My daughter's 23, my son's 14, and my life, I hid behind alcohol and drugs for so long because I was embarrassed. I was so, oh my goodness, I was petrified of anyone knowing, especially in my world of paramedicine, knowing that I was sick. And I didn't want to know I was sick either. But yeah, knowing now what I know, at least I can be honest with my kids if I'm struggling, if I'm having a bad day. And I've said this before, we talk about mental health and we talk about our emotions like we talk about the weather. And I can totally relate to Jordan, you know, when he's saying growing up, you just didn't talk about feelings. That's not what we learned when we grew up. And coming from an alcoholic family as well, it's just, you didn't know how to express yourself. So it's nice to be able to see it's a horrible thing to have to go through to learn how to do that. But my kids are healthier for being able to see me go through ups and downs, but still be able to get through it.
I don't think you can turn into a responsible adult until you see your parents as being human. Because,
so
you know, the assumption that your parents are different than everybody else on the planet, that your dad never looked at another woman, and that your dad never had mental health problems. I mean, it's not like my kids would think that, because I mean, I obviously talk about my mental health all the time, but I think, you know, you need to see the flaws in your parents to be able to accept the flaws in you, because if you see perfection, you can't live up to that. I'm wondering that mental health for you, I mean, without a doubt, you were self-medicating, right? I mean, that's a term that we could probably apply to almost everyone that's addicted to something. So what over the last 2 months, for instance, what do you replace that with? What is the state of your mental health now? Because you have nothing artificial to help you through the day.
That's such a great question. I have to go back to what worked before, and that is, you know, now it's Zoom meetings, talking to my sponsor, and taking care of myself. So I personally am a real high achiever as well, and I put so much pressure on myself to do really well. And I can get kind of off track into the world of nothing to do with myself. So, and sometimes I have to learn how to practice what I preach. I say, oh, self-care, and, you know, do your guided meditations and be mindful and go for the walks and take your dog for a walk. But then I would stop doing that. So no wonder I fall and stumble, but I get back up and have great experiences like this. And I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Oh. Thank you. Let's bring Brent Myers in. Brent, say hi to Nat again. I mean, we all talked beforehand, obviously.
Hi, Nat. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
So, Brent, what do you take from that story?
Well, out of all of them, you know, Sean's rang a bell, and I think that way, you know, Alonzo with over 30 years, myself with 12, and we all had to start at day one. And, you know, they're just inspirational. When I heard about the show today, for me, whenever I get to talk to other people that suffer from the same illness that I do, you know, it's a special treat.
You played in the National Hockey League. I'm not telling you that. I know that you're aware of that, but a lot of people wouldn't be aware of that, because it's not like you that you gained a lot of fame. I'm trying to put this in a gentle way, but I don't think I have to. Is that, you know, you were just another NHLer? Is that a fair thing to say?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, because the last thing I want to do is insult you, but the question is, I think, really important to ask. Do you think that, at least to some extent, the talent that you were born with and all of the hard work that you put into it was negated by the fact that you had both mental health challenges and addiction challenges?
Yeah, it started pretty young, I think around almost 17. And the problem is that at the time, it was sort of working for me. And the social anxiety that I had, the role that I filled as a fighter, you know, it actually was working back then. And it was able, like Sean talked about, being able to, you know, go to parties and certain events and feel more open. It was working, but then it stopped becoming fun. And I think Alonzo could understand there was a point where it just wasn't fun anymore. And it went from only doing cocaine if it was at the party, to swearing I'd never buy it, to buying a lot of it, to getting busted. And it was just a progression that never seemed to stop. It never got better.
You made reference just now, as have I think almost everyone. Sean talked about it. Jordan talked about it, about how Alonzo certainly did, how just being comfortable in this social setting can be so challenging. And, it's what's fascinating is that we knew that almost everybody else in this room that we walk into, that we're so insecure and so worried, that we're the only ones who are feeling this way. If we could ever learn, really learn, that half the room is like that, or maybe 3/4 of the room is like that, that would help a whole lot.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's that uncomfortable silence that I never used to have when I was drinking, because I was playing cards, I was dancing, I was singing, I was changing the music, I was pouring a drink. I mean, I was always doing something. So now I'm sitting across from somebody and it's completely silent. And now I feel uncomfortable, like I have to do something. And so that was where early in my sobriety, I had to work on the fact that I'm okay just being me. And I don't have to be the rah-rah party guy and the one that ends the party at 6 a.m. I'm okay going to bed at 11 at night. And I'm okay getting up early, saying my prayer and my meditation to start my day off. Something I've done every day for 12 years since I gotten sober. And I believe it was Alonzo said, whatever you've done today, do tomorrow. And so I was taught that when I wake up, I get up and I make my bed really nice. I fold my clothes and put them away. And I do a reading out of a meditation book. And I've done that every day for 12 years. And so I think repetition is important for myself and other people that want to be sort of guided a certain way through sobriety.
And finally, for 12 years, you have now gone without medication, right? Self-medication, without the crutch that you were able to use to get you to walk into that room, into that party where, you had insecurities about walking in the room. How have you replaced that? And I think most of all, the question would be, how you doing with that? Because I'm not an addict, right? I gave up drinking only because drinking, alcohol is a depressant. And with a guy with chronic, lifelong depression now, it's kind of stupid if you don't like the buzz, which I never did. And I think because of anxiety, I always feared, oh my God, I'm losing control. So I don't drink, but I also, I know what I do to manage my mental health, and it's medication. What do you do to manage your mental health?
Well, for me, there's a real spiritual side, which I like to call God. I know other people have different versions of that, but I believe that has been a real pillar for me in my sobriety and my recovery. I have friends in Los Angeles that there's about 20 guys that we get on a Zoom call. There's one every day, and you can go on for an hour. And to me, being able to reach out to them on a daily basis has helped me. But it's funny how when Sean was talking about the whiskey, I've seen a couple Instagram posts of, on a cruise ship and a boat, and I instantly went to, I want to go to Colombia and I want to spend 50 grand on a kilo of cocaine and just turn my phone off and hide away. And I don't want to ever talk to anybody again. I'm going to go away in the sunset, and that's how I'm going to end my life. And my head will still tell me that. And to me, that's just reaffirming the disease of addiction, because our mind, our disease wants to kill us, wants to kill me personally. And if I don't do things on a daily basis to try and, quiet those voices get louder, louder, and louder.
Thanks, Ben. You watched, obviously you still watch hockey. You work for the Kings in doing the kinds of things that you're doing right now with us. I guess the question would be, Daniel Carcillo is up next. You would have watched him play, obviously. What did you think of him? Because he his nickname was Car Bomb. He has described his own play as being, kind of crazy on the ice, that he did things that he looks back and goes, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Let's bring Daniel in. And what did you think of him? And I guess it would be, his mental wellness, his health. Did you detect anything from his game?
Well, when I left, I think when Daniel was coming in, and he's exactly the type of player that I love to watch on TV. And obviously I appreciated what he did on the ice because there's just not many of those guys left. He was a warrior on the ice, but now he took that warriorism and he's taken it off the ice now. And I see the courage that he's had when he's come out and spoke on certain topics and stood up for what he really believes in. And that takes courage. And I'm really grateful to see that he's been 5 years clean of the opiates, because I was on those. I was only on them for about a year. And my God, it took me a year and a half before my brain started to feel normal again. So congratulations, Daniel, on that, buddy.
Thanks, brother. Yeah, man. I resonated with your story a lot. Always having to be on the go, always having to occupy our thoughts or ourselves with something being the life of the party, when really inside just being close to dead, and putting that act on, not trying to be a distraction. And thank you to everybody for sharing. Jordan's story always chokes me up, and thank you to Alonzo and Natalie and Sean. It's great to be here with everybody talking about this.
So you have been clean and sober, or clean, for 5 years. When did you retire in relation to your sobriety?
So it'll be 5 years in September from opiates. And I actually got clean during my career when I was 25. And then the last 5 years of my career were just really exceptional. I was just a much better person and had a lot better luck as far as winning goes. But I had to make a decision at 25 whether I wanted to walk away from this game, the only thing that I knew how to do, or get healthy, because everything was coming crashing down on me.
We heard from Nat, who has been successfully, I want to put this in a positive way, for 60 days, which obviously, is a reflection of how tough it is. And Sean was saying that he would watch Mad Men and see them with whiskey, and he would think, oh man, I want that. What is there a trigger for you? Is this, as Alonzo said, a battle every day to do the next day what you did today, because you're successful today?
Yeah, it really is. For me, early on, what I did was I listened to everybody and I did what they told me to do because I wanted to be better. I don't think any of us want to be sick. And so I did the 90 meetings in 90 days and I did all the steps. And for me today now, it's things like isolation, oversleeping and undersleeping, and not communicating to my loved ones around me about how I feel. And that's when I could really start slipping. And that's when I get more anxious. That's when the anxiety starts to creep back in, and the depression. And that's when I know I need to go back inside and do the work. And I was traumatized from a young age. Now, at 17, with what happened to us, I could see how that really shaped me into car bomb and into that player that I was. And then you add on the cumulative trauma of beating people up and doing a job that you don't want to do. But it's what pays the bills, and you're just so entrenched in it, and you're so caught up in it that it's just really hard to walk away from it. And so once I dealt with the trauma at 25 and I got to talk to my family and we all got to talk to each other and we got to communicate how we felt, and I got introduced to this new way of life of talking about your feelings that releases this angst and this shame or this guilt that you think you're the only one that has this issue, and really moving forward with radical honesty. And if you're not feeling well, then calling somebody and telling them that, or even texting them that, or writing it down. And that really helped me move forward into a whole new life of meditation and just taking a breath. Meditation doesn't look like sitting on the edge of your bed or cross-legged like a monk. It could look like what I do in the mornings is I just take 5 deep belly breaths and assess how I feel. And I can't assess how I feel until I get hydrated and until I eat something. And if you're on medication, until you take that medication, and then give yourself an honest look. And it's really radically, Michael, for every hour you know, and I did it before I had this phone call just to assess how I feel.
This is going to sound like a weird question, but what the hell? I've asked many. And sometimes you get the best answers when you ask a question that you go, should I ask that or not? I mean, it's going to be a compliment, but did you know when you were doing drugs, painkillers, did you know you were this smart? Because I listen to you talking now, and everybody who hears you talking goes, wow, that guy, you know, he's not a car bomb. He's a really smart, sensitive guy who instinctively knows the right thing to say. Did you know that was inside?
I was super sensitive. Yeah, I knew that's who I was. And you know, growing up in an Italian household, it was difficult for somebody like me. And, you know, to Jordan's point, you just want to get better and change things for your kids. You know, you don't want to traumatize them by showing them your crazy behavior and then by replicating things that you grew up in that you don't agree with. And so we changed the best that we can. And I always knew, I always wanted that connection with people and my teammates. And I was always trying to be the guy that everybody liked and that everybody would laugh at, and trying to play the best music and really getting to know people and pick 5 songs for them and really, you know, connect. And I didn't do that very effectively my first 5 years, but when I got connected to myself and made this relationship at 25, I mean, my whole life changed for the better. And just recently, this past year, you know, regaining my brain health and my quality of life using, you know, a natural source medicine, it's been the best year of my life by far, you know, and I'm so present with my kids. And when I'm in the present moment, and that's what I try to radically do now every day, anxiety doesn't live there for me, and neither does depression. It's usually when I get caught in the future thinking about things that make me fearful, that's when I get really anxious, and that's when the anxiety starts kicking in. Or when I get too far into the past, that's when I get depressed over certain things that have happened. But I'm really proud of the person that I am today, and I'm really grateful for everything that has happened to me. And hopefully, you know, moving forward, you just tell it as it is, and you can hopefully help people.
Thanks, buddy.
You're welcome.
Wow, this was quite the experience for me. Daniel Carcillo, our cleanup hitter, although I don't think a cleanup hitter hits 6th, although it's been a while since we saw baseball. But I mean, Daniel Carcillo sharing makes me look back at the other 5 people that shared, and there's this common link to all of us. And I think, you know, because I thought in advance, is there anything that we all have in common, or they all have in common, outside of the fact that they have all faced addiction? And I think it's an insecurity that we have all experienced, that until you accept it as just part of who you are, and until you realize that, you know what, when you walk into that room, first of all, you don't care as much what people say. And second of all, you understand that many of the people in that room are experiencing what you're experiencing. Until you accept that, you try to medicate it away. You know, you try to get, I mean, liquid courage is a word that we use often for alcohol. And I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not a drug addict, but I am a person that suffers from mental health issues, and in particular depression. And I understand, as the guy with the cockiest strut around. Oh, yours is pretty cocky too, Daniel, but and Alonzo's pretty cocky too. And actually, all of you people are really cocky, and we all have that in common too. But you know, for me to say that when I'm sick, that I think of that room as being the enemy. And that I think like, it's like I got to prepare myself to go to war, because I don't see myself. I don't like myself. I don't have confidence in myself. And fortunately for me, I got prescribed medication that I took in place of what everybody here replaced it with something else. It's such an important lesson. You guys are also great. Thank you for doing this. Wow. This was like I got to watch this show again. You know what? Casey, you want to watch the show again?
Cancel our Netflix.
Cancel Netflix. We're going to watch, this is episode 50, right? Of Isolation Nation. 50. So thanks to everybody. Why don't you guys, when I say you guys, Phil and Sam, why don't you just throw it open and we'll all say goodbye to each other and we'll do the equivalent of a virtual hug. Let's see who's there. Myers is there. There's a picture of Alonzo. Natalie has a picture of her grandchild. And I don't know, is Sean still there? I can only see these boxes up. There's a picture of Sean Cullen too. What is with putting pictures up of yourselves? I mean, look, I'm looking at Carcillo. That's the real thing. That's not a stupid publicity picture. There he is. This was amazing. And I think when we all talk about this later on, I think we'll all say, wow, you know what? That may have been the best 45 minutes that I've spent without having to pay for it. Wait a sec. That didn't come out the way I wanted it to come out. It may be the best 45 minutes that we've all spent without having to pay a therapist for it. Woo! Thank God. Thanks, guys, and to everybody.
Thanks, Michael.
See you Monday
Thanks, guys.
On this thing called Isolation Nation. Hey, Case, love you. Yeah.
Love you,
Cora,
Case.
love you. Hey, Kara, love you. I'm just thankful for everything. All right, let's go before I start crying. Wait a sec, I'm on medication. I can't cry. But I would be crying. No, I'm faking.